Alex woke up every day in the same alley of a sprawling city, surrounded by the chaos of morning traffic and the ceaseless rhythm of hurried footsteps. The cold, graffiti-covered walls had been his home for years, a reality he never imagined for himself. Wearing tattered clothes and clutching a torn blanket that barely kept the cold at bay, he was as invisible as a fallen leaf on the sidewalk. Though people ignored him, Alex observed each of them with keen eyes, searching for traces of kindness or something to remind him that humanity was still worth believing in. Life hadn't always been like this for Alex. Years ago, he was a young dreamer, full of plans. But a series of tragedies, a car accident that claimed his parents, mounting debts, and the loss of his job, drove him to the streets. The system seemed incapable of helping him, and he sank into the anonymity of the sidewalks. Hunger was an old acquaintance, as was the cold that bit at his skin and the indifference of the people who passed him by daily. That particular morning, the air was colder than usual, but something about it felt different. Alex couldn't pinpoint why, but a strange restlessness followed him as he walked to his usual spot near a bustling downtown cafe. He stretched out his hand, hoping to collect a few coins from the hurried patrons. Few stopped, and those who did left him a glance of pity along with spare change. Suddenly, a well-dressed man exited the cafe, holding an impeccable leather briefcase. He looked directly at Alex, something that rarely happened, and approached him. Without saying a word, the man handed him a white envelope. Alex stared at the stranger, puzzled. But before he could ask anything, the man had vanished into the crowd. With trembling hands, Alex debated whether to open the envelope right there or save it for later. Curiosity, however, got the better of him. He tore open the flap and pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper. As he unfolded it, his eyes locked on the opening sentence. "You are the heir to a fortune you never knew existed." For a moment, Alex thought it was a cruel joke, or perhaps a scam. He had heard stories of people on the streets being deceived by false promises. Yet, there was something different about this envelope. The letter was handwritten, with elegant and formal penmanship, and included specific details like his full name and clear instructions. Go to an office downtown for further information. As absurd as the situation seemed, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that it might be true. After all, he had nothing to lose. Carefully tucking the letter into his worn coat, he spent the rest of the day wondering what it all meant. Could this be a chance to change his life, or just another disappointment to add to his collection? When night fell, Alex couldn't sleep. Curiosity consumed him, and he resolved to visit the address listed in the letter the next morning. Though unsure of what awaited him, he felt a spark of hope he hadn't experienced in years. The mere act of allowing himself to believe in something seemed to warm his spirit. The next morning, Alex made his way to the building mentioned in the letter. It was an imposing structure, its glass windows reflecting the clear blue sky. He hesitated before entering, feeling out of place amidst the luxury. The receptionist eyed him with a mix of suspicion and surprise. But when he mentioned the name of the letter's sender, her expression shifted. She led him to an office on the top floor, where a serious-looking man awaited him. "Mr. Alex Turner?" the man asked, extending his hand. Alex nodded, still trying to process what was happening. The man introduced himself as an attorney and explained that Alex had been identified as the sole heir to a distant uncle, someone Alex had never even heard of. "Your uncle, Richard Calloway, was an extremely private man. He amassed a vast fortune over his lifetime, but distanced himself from the family for reasons he chose to keep secret. Before passing, he left explicit instructions for you to be found and informed of your inheritance." Alex listened in disbelief. The idea of being related to someone so wealthy seemed surreal. The attorney continued, explaining that the inheritance included not just money but also properties and investments. He presented documents that verified everything, and Alex, still in shock, signed the papers that would officially make him the owner of an estimated $200 million fortune. When Alex left the office, he could hardly believe what had happened. From homeless to millionaire in less than 24 hours. The letter he'd received had opened the door to an entirely new reality. Yet, as he walked through the streets he once knew so intimately, now with a bank account overflowing, one lingering question remained in his mind. Why him? As the cold city wind enveloped him, Alex realized his journey was only just beginning. Alex stood at a crossroads between his past and his future. Walking through the streets he had roamed daily, a strange sensation overtook him. He was no longer the invisible man society ignored, but he didn't yet know who he was in this new reality. His reflection in the polished windows of upscale stores felt foreign, as though he were staring at a stranger he barely recognized. The only certainty was that his life had changed irrevocably, and he would have to learn how to navigate this uncharted territory. The first step was accessing part of the fortune that now belonged to him. Guided by the attorney, Alex opened a bank account where the funds began to be transferred. For the first time in years, he could afford a hot meal, new clothes, and a decent place to stay. He decided to rent a suite at a luxurious hotel downtown. Entering the room, with its velvet curtains and panoramic views, Alex felt the weight of the change. It was both a relief and a burden. The soft bed felt like an entirely different universe from the cold ground he once knew so well. That night, he sat on the hotel balcony, gazing at the city lights. He tried to process everything that had happened, but his mind kept circling back to one question. Who was Richard Calloway? And why had he, a man Alex had never met, chosen to leave his fortune to a nephew who didn't even know he existed? The following morning, Alex asked the lawyer for more details about his uncle. He received a folder full of documents, old photos, and information about Calloway's businesses. It was then that Alex began to grasp the complexity of the fortune he had inherited. Richard wasn't just wealthy. He was a financial strategist who had built an empire through controversial and, in some cases, ethically questionable investments. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and rapidly growing cryptocurrency ventures were all part of the web. It became clear that this fortune was as powerful as it was perilous. Among the papers, Alex found a photograph that caught his eye. It was an image of Richard at a gala, surrounded by influential people, yet his eyes betrayed a sadness, almost a sense of guilt. This sparked even more curiosity in Alex. Who was this man, really? With newfound resources, Alex decided to dig into his uncle's past. He hired a private investigator to unravel Calloway's complex history. He learned that Richard had distanced himself from the family due to disagreements over how wealth should be used. While most relatives pursued lives of excess, Richard had wanted something different. He believed wealth was a tool for power, but also for purpose. However, his attempts to right past wrongs had created enemies along the way. As Alex delved into the origins of the fortune, he also faced the practical challenges of his new life. People who once ignored him now wanted to be close to him. Strangers recognized him on the streets, thanks to news reports about his transformation. Some greeted him warmly, while others sought to take advantage. An old acquaintance from his time on the streets approached him asking for money, but the man's threatening tone set Alex on edge. He began to understand that wealth wasn't just a blessing. It was also a curse, drawing unwanted attention. Despite this, Alex tried to use his wealth meaningfully. He visited shelters where he had spent nights and made generous donations. He thanked the few people who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. But he soon realized that good deeds weren't enough to fill the void he felt. He still didn't know his place in the world. The situation took a darker turn when the investigator uncovered disturbing information. Richard Calloway hadn't chosen Alex simply because he was a distant relative. There was more to the story. Among the documents was a letter written by Richard himself, addressed to Alex but never sent. In it, Richard spoke of regrets, wrong choices, and his hope that his inheritance could be used to correct the damage he had caused. His final message was clear. Alex, you are my last chance to make things right. This revelation shook Alex to his core. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. It wasn't just about enjoying the fortune. It was about honoring a complicated and perhaps dangerous legacy. The deeper he dove into his uncle's secrets, the more he realized that Richard had left behind a network of allies and enemies. And some of those enemies were already aware of Alex's existence. A few weeks after inheriting the fortune, Alex began noticing he was being followed. Men in dark suits appeared frequently in places he visited, watching him from a distance. He received calls from unknown numbers, with anonymous voices warning him to leave things alone. Alex was terrified, but he was also resolute. He decided to confront the lawyer, who seemed to know more than he had initially revealed. During a tense conversation, the lawyer admitted that part of the fortune was tied to dubious schemes Richard had started but never finished. Rival companies and criminal organizations were interested in these assets, and Alex had now become their newest target. Hearing this, Alex realized his new life wouldn't just be about luxury and comfort. He was at the center of a storm, surrounded by forces he barely began to understand. Yet, something inside him stirred. Years spent on the streets had given him resilience, and he knew he couldn't give up. Alex then made the decision to fight for control of his life and the inheritance left to him. As the danger closed in, he realized he would have to quickly learn how to play the game Richard had started, or he would lose everything, possibly even his life. Alex understood that a final confrontation was inevitable. The forces circling Richard Calloway's inheritance wouldn't let him take control without resistance. The pressure from every direction, unknown enemies, questionable allies, and his own self-doubt, pushed him to take a stand. He didn't just want to protect what was now his. He wanted to understand his uncle's true intentions in leaving him in such a perilous position. The first step was to form a plan. Alex decided to use part of the fortune to hire experts who could untangle the web of corruption and intrigue surrounding Richard's business dealings. Lawyers, financial analysts, and security consultants were brought in, all carefully vetted to ensure confidentiality. Alex knew trusting the wrong people could cost him dearly. Meanwhile, Richard's enemies began to act more aggressively. One night, the car Alex was traveling in was intercepted by masked men. He narrowly escaped, thanks to the intervention of recently hired security guards. This attack confirmed Alex's worst fears. He was being hunted, and the wealth he inherited was as much a trap as it was a treasure. Determined to face the threats head-on, Alex delved into the records Richard had left behind. Among documents and reports hidden in private safes, he uncovered critical information. There was an organization called the Consortium, a group of corrupt businessmen who profited from illegal operations Richard had once invested in. What made Alex a target was his newfound access to records that could incriminate powerful members of this network. This discovery made Alex realize his inheritance wasn't just about money, it was about power. Richard hadn't simply wanted Alex to use the fortune to rebuild his life. He had intended for Alex to dismantle the dark legacy he had helped create. This realization gave Alex a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just a man trying to survive. He wanted to make a difference. Alex devised a bold strategy: to use the fortune to expose the consortium's secrets while building his own network of allies. He began donating large sums to social causes, gaining positive media attention. At the same time, he funded investigations into the consortium's dealings, exposing their illegal activities. Each new headline in the press struck a blow against the enemies trying to silence him. However, this war came with consequences. A former associate of Richard, now a leader of the consortium, confronted Alex personally. He was a cold, calculating man who made a tempting offer: abandon the inheritance and live a comfortable life off the radar, in exchange for his safety. Alex knew that accepting the deal would mean betraying the principles he was beginning to build. He refused, but the threat lingered in the air. As tensions escalated, Alex found support in an unexpected place. A woman named Emily, who had been Richard's assistant for years, approached him offering her help. Emily knew details no one else did about his uncle's business and revealed that Richard had spent his last years trying to undo the alliances he had built with the consortium. She believed Alex was the only person capable of finishing what Richard had started. With Emily's help and the allies he had gathered along the way, Alex planned a decisive move. He used the remaining funds to organize a massive press conference where he would reveal damning documents linking the consortium to financial crimes and other illegal activities. The event would be broadcast live, making it impossible for anyone to cover up the revelations. On the day of the conference, Alex knew he was taking an enormous risk. Before stepping onto the stage, he received threatening messages warning him that proceeding would cost him his life. But he couldn't back down now. When he began speaking, he shared not only the secrets he had uncovered, but also his own story. How a man who had once lived on the streets was thrust into the center of a battle that symbolized the clash between greed and purpose. The reactions were explosive. Members of the consortium began to face investigations and arrests, and the organization's influence started to crumble. However, victory came at a cost. Alex spent months under police protection while the remnants of the consortium tried to regroup. He had to forfeit a significant portion of the inheritance to ensure that the illegal funds were redirected to compensate for the damage caused in the past. When the dust finally settled, Alex emerged as a respected public figure. He used the remaining resources to establish an organization dedicated to helping people in vulnerable situations, like he once had been. Despite the challenges and losses, he felt he had found his true purpose. One evening, Alex walked through a familiar street, passing a shelter where he had once slept. He stopped for a moment, watching people facing the same struggles he had overcome. Though he was now a powerful and recognized man, Alex never forgot where he came from. With a faint smile, he left a large anonymous donation at the shelter and continued on, ready to keep transforming lives and leaving a legacy of honesty and generosity. Enjoyed this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more content like this. Leave your thoughts in the comments and share this with someone who might also find inspiration in this narrative. Your engagement is essential to keep bringing impactful and emotional stories. Thank you for watching.